Algebra students, this is our introduction video for our lesson on comparing graphs. This is our last lesson where we've been talking about graphs of functions, and the focus of this lesson is going to be when you're comparing two functions, two graphs. For our introduction video, we're going to be talking about this question here, where we are given this graph below, which shows the populations of Baltimore and Cleveland in the 20th century. Cleveland and Baltimore are those two cities there in the United States, in case you were curious. We've got B of T is going to represent the population of Baltimore in year T, and C of T is the population of Cleveland in year T. A quick reminder about function notation. We know function notation always starts with the function name. So for example, if I write the letter B, that means I'm talking about the function that describes the population of Baltimore. In our parentheses is always the input here, which would be the year. And then if we have an output, it would be over here, and that number would represent the population in that year. So using that information and this graph below, we've got three questions we're going to look at. The first one asks us to estimate B of 1930 and explain what it means in this situation. Maybe go ahead, try pausing the video and doing that question now. So if my input is 1930, that means I'm looking at this year right here. And then to know which line I'm looking at, that's where the function name comes in handy. B tells me I'm looking at Baltimore's population, which is that blue line. So that means this point right here is the one I'm trying to estimate. And I would say that it's around 800,000. So I could say B of 1930 equals 800,000. For what that means in the situation, it means in 1930, the population was 800,000. But there's one more thing I need to mention. Because the focus of this lesson is comparing two functions, two graphs, I want to make sure I talk about which city. So I could say in 1930, the population of Baltimore is 800,000. In 1930, the population of Baltimore is 800,000. And remember, there's lots of ways you could say that sentence. You could say the Baltimore has 800,000 people in 1930. You just need those three pieces. Our second question asks about, were the two cities' populations ever the same? And if so, when? We've got this lovely graph here. Where on the graph would I want to look at to see if the populations were the same? Any ideas? Well, if I'm looking for when the populations are the same, that means I would need to look at where those lines cross. If the lines aren't crossing, like in 1900, that means those populations are different. But when those lines are intersecting, that means the population would be the same. So for example, in 1910, I can see those two lines cross right here, which would mean they both have the same population. Were the two cities' populations ever the same? Yes. If so, when? In 1910. Is that the only time? Look at that graph. Looks like in 1910, and then it happens again one more time right here. This is going to have to be an estimate, I might say, and it looks like a little before halfway, so I'm going to say 1940. Let's do 1943. It's an estimate, so I'm guessing there with that year. We've got one final question. Which statements below do you agree with? And we're going to select all of the statements we agree with. So this first one says B of 2000 is greater than C of 2000. This one is asking, in 2000, does Baltimore's population, is it greater than Cleveland's population in that year? So if we go up to our graph, here is year 2000, and what do we think? Do we agree? Looking at our graph, Baltimore's population is up here, a little above 600,000, which would be more than Cleveland's population here. So I'm going to say, yes, I agree with that first one. What do you think about that second statement there? The second one's similar to the first one, where it's comparing the population of those two cities, this time in the year 1900. In 1900, those populations are not equal, so I would not agree with that. If I look at the graph, it looks like Baltimore's population is greater than Cleveland's, so I would agree with something like this, but not that the populations are equal. That third one says C of 800,000 equals 1920. What do you think about that third one? Well, if we look at our graph here, it's talking about Cleveland, 1920, 800,000, 1920, 800,000. But the problem here is that the input and output are backwards in this function notation. So I would not agree with that, but I would agree with something like this, where we've got the year in the parentheses and the population as our output. It goes back to function notation here. And then one final one, it says B of t equals 200,000 does not have a solution. What do we think? Well, if I look at a population of 200,000, there is no year where that would be true for Cleveland or Baltimore. So yes, I do agree with that final statement. We'll be looking at more problems like this in today's lesson, where we're comparing two functions and two graphs. Thanks so much for watching.